make it valid inside the class. Remember when we ask to write a program and read input from the user, we always ask for check for validity. Why we need to check for valid inputs? Because if the user input invalid data, then your program will not work correctly. So this is why we have to check for the data before we run the program and give results. We need to check the input is valid or not. Now for the classes, it should be the same. Now if you want to save data inside the class or inside the object, make sure that the data we are saving is valid. So don't let the client code put a data that is invalid so that the class, whenever you call one of its methods, it gives you wrong answer. So to prevent this error by storing or saving invalid data into the object, then we need to hide the information and let the class itself takes control of validity whenever the user from outside needs to change the data. So what is the idea of information hiding or data encapsulation? The idea is that the programmers, they want to use the classes, they don't want to know the details of the implementation of the methods, how they work. They want to know what they do. For example, next integer, which is part of the scanner object. If I want to use this method, I don't need to know as a programmer, as a client code, I don't want to know the details of how it does its job. All what I want to know, what does it do? Next int, what does it do? It needs integer. For example, in string, char at, what does it do? It gives me a character at a certain index. But I don't need to know how it is doing its job. So this is why they make a separation. It's called information hiding. So designing a method so it can be used without knowing details. So here there is a separation between what and how. Of course, if you are the designer of the class, you have to implement how this method is working. But if you are the programmer, you are the one who is using the class and you want to use the methods, then you don't need to know how, you need to know what this method is doing. Now the public and private modifiers, you have already seen examples on the difference between public and private. Here we go into some examples theoretically. Now it says, whenever you type public, then it means that your data that you have defined in your class can be accessed from inside and outside the object. When I say access, it means reading and writing. And remember what the difference between reading. Reading, you don't change the data, but writing, you change the data. So, for example, if you have a class, circle a class, and notice now radius as double is defined as public. So whenever you create an object outside this class, for example, in your main class, and now here you are creating an object C1. So now you can access the data radius directly by using dot. And here you are writing, see, because you are changing the radius, so you are writing, so it is allowed. Why? Because the data radius is public. Now, if you change the data and define it as a private now, so once you define it as a private, then you can use it only inside the class. So it can be accessed only inside the object. If you're outside the class in the client code, for example, in your main program, here you are now creating an object called C1. Now, if you try to access it directly by using dot, then the compiler will stop you and it stays as a syntax error, and it says that this is not allowed because you have defined the data private. As a Java convention, it means a trend. Trend, it means tawajjuh. So what they do for Java conventions, the programmers always define classes public, and they always define variables inside the classes private. So when you define a data private, and sometimes part of the class design, you need to show the outside world what is the value of the data inside or how to change it inside, then you need two methods. So again, if you don't want this data to be seen outside, just leave them private, that's it. But what if you want to show them outside and you take control of writing and reading? Then you need to define two methods. The first method is called accessor, which is used for reading. And the second method, it's called the mutator, which is used for writing or setting. Here I will show you what to do exactly for every class that has private data. So what is, first of all, since they are methods, then remember they should have return value, they should have name, and they should have input parameters, and you write the code inside. So typically for the accessors which are used for reading, typically their names, you put get before the name of the data member. So if the name of the data member is radius, so the name of the method for the accessor for this data will be get radius. If the name is, for example, width, you name it get width. So this is for the get. And now for the set, which is called the mutator, this is the method that will allow you to change the data inside the class. Then the name will be the name of the member, data member, but you proceed it with set. So if the name of the member is radius, you call it set radius. If it is width, you call it set width. And one is for reading and the other one is for writing. So the get method is used to read, which is get, the value of a private data member. And the set method is used to write a new value to a private data member. So here you are going to write a new value. And again, if the data is not a private, then you don't need these methods. So these methods are only if the data is a private. And I call them bodyguards, as I already explained that before. The first one is a bodyguard for reading. So if you want to read the data, just read it through this method. And the other bodyguard is set. If you want to change the data, then you have to change the data through this method. Give the data to this method, and this method will check. If the value is valid, it will change it. Otherwise, it will reject the change. Here is an example. For our bank account example, you remember we had some data members. I will just demonstrate by two data members, type of the bank account and balance. Type is a string and balance is double. So how to write the get method? Since they are private, then you need one for getting the value and one for setting the value. So for reading the value, so for getting them, for the get methods, again, you need name, you need to know the input parameters, you need to know the return value. So the methods will be public. Now for the first data type, which is type, see the data type is a string. So the return value for this method should be string. For the second data member, it is the balance, it is double. So the return value is double. Now for the name. Now the name of the data member here is type, T is a small letter. So the name of the accessor will be get type, and see T here is capital letter. So that's easy for you to read the two words, get type. And notice no input parameters. And for getting methods, you don't need input parameter, and don't forget inside to write return, because these methods will return a value. And what is you're going to return? You're going to return the private data member, which is type. So this dot type. For the second method, get method, the return value is double because it is the balance is double, and you don't need input parameter, and the name is get balance. Why? Because the name of the data member is balance. So you name the get method get balance, and it will return the value. This dot balance will return it to the user. Now for the set method, since the set method will change the value to a new value, then we need to supply the new value as a parameter. So the return value for the set method is always void. So if you want to set a method, you change the data member, the set method will be the return value void. The name will be the same name as the data member, but you put set in front of it and capitalize the first letter of the name of the variable. So if it is type, it will be set type. If it is balance, it will be set balance, T capital letter and B capital letter. Now for the input parameter, this is the new value that you want to change, or you want to replace the old value of the data member. You need to supply it as an input parameter. If the data member is a string, so the input parameter is a string. If it is double, then the input parameter is double. So inside there is no return value. You simply move the new value supplied by the user into the data member inside, and here you move the new value supplied by the user into the data member.